Okay, so most of you do know me and know that my deal is the HR. I had a topic in mind, and we're going to get to that. It's going to be the second half. As most of you know, I sent out an email and said, okay, we're getting ready to do our workshops. What do you want to hear about? Is that really echoing? Okay. And primarily what came back was basics about benefits. When do they start? When do they end? How do I handle if they move a status change? So to be honest, Renee and I sat down and said, okay, what's a different way to do this that maybe, just presenting similar information in a different way to try and help with memory recall. We realize you don't work with this as often as we do. We get, 10 questions a week. You maybe deal with it once in a year or once in 5 years. So we do realize that we are always available. So this is not an intent to try and get you to be the expert, but just to help you, since that does continue to be a question. So Mike's little caveat or plug for being interactive is going to be really important, because we're going to talk about benefit basics. I'm going to give you new forms that we've been developing, and then the topic I wanted to talk about was the personnel handbook. And so we are going to get to that. But the reason I need you to be interactive is because we're going to talk about some scenarios, and I want to hear what you think the answers to these are. Again, just a little bit of a different way to look at this information. So Susan started working on August 15th. What is the first day that she is benefit eligible? October 1st. Excellent. Yes, so our requirement is they are eligible the first day of the month after 30 days of employment. Okay? So if they would, your months that don't have 30 days, it really is 30 days. It's not just a calendar month. It's a 30-day. So keep that in mind. Scenario number 2. Becky's been working 15 hours for the past 2 years. The pastor has decided to add a few more duties to her job description and increase her hours to 25 a week. Is Becky eligible for benefits? Yes. Okay. And when do they begin? Okay. I've heard 30 days. I heard right away. All right. So she is eligible the first day of the next month after the pastor made that change. Okay, so as I say, and if you've ever spent much time talking to me on the phone, you know I say this. All right, let's be real. Nobody knows about this before it happens. As the person doing payroll or doing the benefits, most of the time we don't know about this before it happens. So it's always kind of, we're dealing with it after it's already happened. It's like, okay, the event has really already transpired. You may even be already into that next month. The big thing I want to get across with this scenario is the fact that give us a call, because in this case, because she's been working for you, she is eligible for benefits. Now, but the pastor does have that discretion to say, okay, I'm reviewing this, I'm looking at this, do I really want to increase this position to that many hours? Because it does have a budget impact, it does have a financial situation to it. And so if we went past, okay, well, she started doing that in mid-August and now it's September and, Twila, I'm way behind the 8 ball, I didn't know this. I'm not as concerned about that part, because we can still say, all right, get her the forms. We can still go back and make it effective September 1 if she were to, if this were to happen in an August situation. Or we can say, okay, the pastor's officially made it as of September, so we're going to make this effective October 1. We have a little bit of leeway in this scenario. Okay, there are some things I don't have leeway in, I do in this. So rule of thumb, give us a holler, we can talk through that scenario. and figure out what's best for you, what's best for that employee, so that they really do still get the benefits they're entitled to. So what about the other way? Patrick has been working for 35 hours a week. He's decided he wants to cut back. Pastor has said, okay, we'll let you cut back to 15 hours a week. And he's decided that, or his hours have effectively changed as of 9/29. He isn't currently enrolled in health, dental, life, and long-term disability. When do his benefits end? Anybody? September 30th. That's right. And this is one of those I don't have a lot of leeway on. Benefits end at the end of the month that the employee is no longer an eligible employee. They're eligible deemed on the number of hours they're working. Okay, so in this case, you know, again, it doesn't always happen that it's, you know, 9/29, it might be 9/20 or, you know, 9/15, but it's always going to be at the end of the month. The other piece of that is we cannot cancel benefits in the middle of a month. So it always has to be at the end of the month. Okay? So Jennifer is getting married on June 25th. She wants to change her name, add her spouse to her health plan, and add her stepchildren to her dental plan. What form does she need to complete? What did you say, Brad? Okay, so she's saying a change form. It's actually an enrollment form. So because she's adding people onto her plan that have not been there and on before, we need all of their information. So we need, you know, the spouse's date of birth and social security number and that kind of thing. So we need to do an enrollment form. So the big question that we get a lot is, but when does he get added to the health plan? So if their marriage was on June 25th, when can he come on?
August 1st?
Close. August 1st and July 1st. It's July 1st. Okay? So this is a qualifying event. It's different than a new hire. A qualifying event is when it's a marriage, a birth, a death, a divorce, or a loss of other coverage. And when that happens, the employee has 30 days to complete paperwork and get that back into us, but that change takes effect the first day of the next month after the event. So in this case, their marriage is June 25th. He would be able to be added on the coverage July 1. Now, we may not get paperwork until July 15th, because they do have 30 days from the event to fill it out, but we would have to retroactively go back, as would you from a payroll standpoint. So when will her stepchildren be added to her dental plan? Right, same time, so July 1. It's still the qualifying event, and that would be a July 1 add. So there's one piece of this complicated scenario that we haven't talked about. And it's probably one that we struggle with the most, and it goes in line with the last question. What document needs to be sent to the HR office? So what piece of this have we not talked about yet? Any clue? New name, right. Obviously she's getting married. You know, most of the time, newly married people want to get their name changed immediately, and they'll walk into your office and say, I'm married, change my name. Do not do that. I mean, honestly, with the requirement and the forms that we're required to submit to the IRS, you guys and us, don't do that. The only time you should be doing a name change is when they walk in with their social security card. that shows. So newly married, yes, encourage them. Go get go get a new Social Security card with your new name. As soon as you have the card, bring it back to us. We'll give it to the HR office. They'll change all the name on the paper, on the benefit side of it, and at that point, you can change the payroll. Because, and this is really important, with healthcare reform, with the ACA, within your who's where, remember, what you change in payroll carries over and rolls into your who's where, okay? So every scenario, you know, you'll notice I'm looking at from 3 different angles. I'm looking at it from a benefit side, a payroll side, and the who's where side. And the reason is, if you do that before you have a Social Security change, and we've had this happen, let's say their marriage is in October or November, and you change that in payroll, your W-2 is being submitted under the new name, and we're submitting the ACA forms and requirements under their old name. And the IRS has their old name. So what's happening is they're needing to be able to identify and match up all 3 of those. And so what's been happening is once we go to submit the ACA forms, it rejects those. Because if you change it in payroll and you do your upload, it changes it in who's where. So just a good learning situation. Do not change a name until you have a Social Security card. And then we want to be able to see that and need to see that so that we can then change it on the health forms and that type of thing. Okay? Any questions on that? Yes. Yes, yep, a copy of their new Social Security card. Now, if you're going to do that, be very careful. That's people's very private information. Don't just email that unless you're using the Virtru, which is the encrypted, and or just fax it to us. Okay? All right, so scenario 5. You terminated Jack or he quit, effective 9/30. He has 2 weeks of vacation leave accrued. When did the benefits end? September 30th. Yes, that is right. Okay, so why am I throwing in on his vacation leave? How do you do that? How do you pay that out? Is there a time limit? Okay, so I'm going to hit a couple different angles. Again, this is one of those where a lot of times you have to be real and I wasn't going to act with as much emotion. I swear it never fails. I do payroll and then I find out somebody's leaving and it's the end of the month payroll, and if I literally would have known 6 hours earlier, I would have included their vacation pay and would have been done. And so you're sitting there and you're like, okay, it's the end of the month. We just did payroll. Now what do I do? Well, from a benefit standpoint, as of September 30th, he's no longer an employee. He's no longer actively at work, not physically at work. His benefits stop September 30th, regardless of what you have for vacation leave to pay out. Okay? He's entitled to his vacation pay, so he gets it. So then you kind of come in, okay, from a payroll standpoint, what's my requirements? Well, Department of Labor says that when you have accrued leave or paid leave that needs to be paid out, it should be paid to the employee no later than the next regularly scheduled payroll, or once they return your property. So here's the hard part, and here's typically how I handle this, just because I do tend to be a little bit, I try to be, even on an employee that's leaving, I try to be deferential to the employee. Usually I will have a conversation and say, hey, I just did payroll. I didn't realize, you were leaving. Do you want it now, or would the next payroll cycle be quick enough? Let the employee decide. I mean, yes, from yours and my standpoint, if you're the one doing payroll, if they say, oh no, I really need it now, we're moving, you know, all of those kinds of things, give deference to that and just go ahead and pay them. Yes, it means you're gonna do a second set of tax reporting and paying and, you know, potentially in that, but go ahead and do it. Now you could legally, you know, make them wait, but yes.
What if you don't give accrued vacations, just one lump sum at the beginning of the year?
A vacation leave?
Yeah.
So like when you give your vacation at the beginning of the year?
July 1st, you get 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay, you quit July 30th.
Okay.
You get that 2 weeks.
All right, so that's a really good question. What do you do with that accrued?
Can you repeat your questions, Twila? It's just hard for people to hear.
Yep. What do you do with that accrued vacation leave? Like when they get it, if you have a leave policy where you get it all at the beginning of the month or get beginning of the year, okay? What do you do with that when the employee leaves? There's different mindsets, and you have to actually kind of look at this at your location, because do they have to work there for a year before they get vacation? Do they have to work there a certain amount of time? When you do from that scenario, really, you're working backwards. You know, so what you gave them on July 1 is really for the previous year. It's for their service the previous year. Should they get that? Should that be paid out? Let's say they're 6 months into the year and they still have leave left. Okay? It really does boil down to you as the employer. In most cases, accrued leave for vacation is a benefit. And what that means is the employee earned it. So once you gave that to them, it's rightfully theirs, and you should pay it out. Okay? There are some places that will prorate however many months, and they'll kind of do a prorate of that. But in that scenario, if they took a great big, if they took a 2-week vacation in August and then left in October, you're not going to have them pay you back for any of that. Okay, so just different scenarios to think about and look at with that. The handbook is actually what we're going to talk about at the last, is a great way to kind of lay that out. And there's a piece in there that you would be able to edit, and we can talk a little bit more on that. Debbie?
Is there a law that you have to pay them their accrued? I don't think we do. I think if they go, we also have a that's in our handbook that if you accrue this many hours, you can only carry over that many and you lose them.
Okay, so Debbie asked, is it a law that you have to pay it out? And then their handbook says they can only accrue so many, and if you don't use them, you lose them. Okay, so no, it is not, if your policy states otherwise. Okay, usually the way Department of Labor would look at that is if you don't say that you're not going to pay out unused vacation leave, and it's a benefit, they would say that is implied, that the employee earned those and they should be paid for them if they leave. Okay? Now, your second question of only allowing them to carry over and, and they would lose those days if they didn't use those, that is perfectly acceptable. You can do that because that's your policy. And Department of Labor really, they don't require us to offer any kind of paid leave. So they don't require us to offer vacation and sick leave. If you've ever talked to me on the phone, you know I always say, now that being said, we as a nonprofit and churches will not continue to get good employees if we don't. Because that has become such a norm and such a standard in the US and elsewhere, much more so than even than what we do. But that we really need to attract good employees and keep good employees, be just and be a good employer, we need to. Okay, Julie has a 24-year-old son getting married in October. How long can he stay on the plan?
Since he's getting married, doesn't that take him off that 20?
So she said, since he's getting married, doesn't that take him off? And I'm hearing to stay until he's 26. Okay, so you're both partially correct, okay? And the reason I say that is our plan, because of ACA, so let me back up. ACA rules came out and said, you must cover a dependent to age 26. Then they added caveats and said, at the employer's discretion, you can put some exceptions in, okay? So what I really want you to know is that on our plan, they can be on up to age 26. But what I get a lot of times is people will call in and they'll go, my spouse's plan is saying, you know, they have to get off because they're getting married, that, you know, that's causing to kick them off. Well, they can. So employers can make the policies of if they're getting married, they have to get off. If they're working a full-time job and eligible for benefits elsewhere, or it doesn't even have to be full-time. If they're eligible for benefits elsewhere, they can they can ask them to leave. We don't on our plan. But just in case you have employees come to you that says, well, that's not how my husband's plan is, that's okay. There are differences in that instance, okay? Lisa works 40 hours a week for 9 months out of the year. She's enrolled in health and long-term disability for the full year. How do you handle the months when she is not working but receiving benefits? Now, in most cases, this is not going to affect you unless you have, in most cases this happens in a school, but there are occasions that it happens with youth ministry. Because a lot of times they might not put in any hours during those 2 months. So, how do you handle the months when when that person's not working? Debbie?
What I do, because we do have an employee that's on salary, working for the school for 9 months. So I take her annual benefits and divide it by 9 months instead of 12 and over with home.
Okay, so
She knows that.
So you do for the whole year, you divide it by the 9 months and over withhold all year to make up for those that she's not going to be able to have enough on. And she knows that ahead of time. Okay? Anybody else deal with that situation?
She just broke down into a 12-month year. She's salary.
Oh, so you pay her salary over the 12 months?
We do not.
Okay. So in your case, you don't. Okay, so this is one of those scenarios that I just wanted to get you to stop and think about a little bit. Maybe not prevalent that you use it or that you have it, but if you actually have a portion where they don't work and don't receive a paycheck, then again, I'm coming at this from that who's where side. We need you to make sure that on that person in who's where, you have include on invoices without pay. And it's on their demographic screen, it's in the left-hand column, it's all the way down at the bottom. It's literally it's a check mark. Okay, so if you include on invoices without pay, then it's okay that you don't have a payroll for that person. Because you as the parish are still going to be charged for their benefits. Because we're saying, it should continue all year long. Now, if you pay them over a 12-month period, you don't have to worry about it. Then that doesn't matter. Some locations will only withhold the correct monthly amount, and then on those couple months where they're not working, they'll make the employee pay the parish back. You can do it that way, but the employee then doesn't get the benefit of the pre-tax part of that for those 2 months, or 2 months or 3 months, whatever it is. it's better to either do it the way Debbie talked about, where you do it withhold extra all year long, or a lot of times what I've done is I'll even just go like the 3 months ahead of when I know they're going to be gone and say, okay, let's split those 2 months over these 3 months, and I'll over withhold in those months. The big thing is if you're over withholding, you got to keep track of that, because if they end up quitting in the midst of that, you know, at any point in time, you got to make sure you can exactly say, here's how much they should have paid, here's how much we withheld, we owe them this much back. Okay, so that's just another little scenario or caveat on that one. So John started on August 1st. Yes?
You know what, Twila, I was just going to mention that in Connect Now accounting, on the payroll side, you guys can put in a limit. So if you calculate out how much those benefits are going to cost for the whole year, you can put that limit in there so that you know how much is, you can see how much has been withheld and then how much actually needs to be. So if they quit anytime during the year, you kind of have that audit right there for you.
So did everybody hear that? Denise is saying that in ParaSoft, you can actually put in a limit. You can figure out what a year's worth of those benefits would be, and you can put in a limit so that at any point in time, if they would quit, you'd be able to see what you owed them back and helped with that. So if you have that scenario, don't be afraid to talk with Denise and ask on how to set that piece up. I think that's a great reminder on how to do that. So our next scenario, John started on August 1st. He's working 40 hours a week. He completed an enrollment form for health and dental. He signed the forms and then turned them into you on September 5th. We called you back and said he's not benefit eligible. Why?
Back pay, September 5th.
The date of September 5th. Really specifically, why? What is that? What happened?
Longer than 30 days.
It's longer than the 30 days. And this is one of those instances where we don't have much leeway. And part of that is because they do spot check us. They do question us. They do go back. They being our providers, because they have the right to. Their job as our providers are to make sure that we have people on that are truly eligible and that we're processed correctly. So we hate this, and we have had to have these conversations. Encourage your employees. And I will tell you what I do on the paperwork. I write at the top, this is due back to my office by this date, and benefits will start as of this date. So that there's no question. It's just a good customer service thing to do for your own employees. Right on there so there's no doubt about what date they need to get it back to you. So asking, can he get back on in a year's time? So every year during open enrollment, employees can come on. So yes, he's not basically off forever, but it could be a significant time, depending on when that cycle would happen. Okay. There might not be a lot of the schools, but there's a few of them. A contracted teacher has informed you that she will not be returning in the fall. What date does her benefits end? End of the contract. Right. So, in most cases across the diocese, the only people that should be under employment by contract is in our schools. Okay? So if you've been around as long as I have, that's different. Back in the old days, parish employees had a contract. But that is not the case anymore. So this should only be happening in our Catholic schools. And contracts, contracted teachers are the one person where they may not be actively at work anymore, but still get to keep the benefits. And that's just a school thing. And it's still an accepted practice across schools. So that would be the end of that contract year. Okay? All right, scenario 10. Jessica has decided, so she's on our benefits, she's on our health insurance. She's decided she no longer wants the health coverage. When can she terminate that coverage?
Wouldn't that be the first month after she told, the first of the month after she told you?
Good try. First of the month after she told us. Anybody else?
End of the year.
She has to wait for
Open enrollment. It is open enrollment. Now, so every December, November, because we usually run our open enrollment October, November. So every year, employees get to decide, am I taking these benefits for the next calendar year? And then everything goes, either stops or starts December 31 and January 1st, okay? The other time that she can terminate coverage is those qualifying events. And that's kind of the missed piece that a lot of times when people call us, my first question is, well, why does she want to cancel? Oh, well, you know, her spouse lost his job, he got a new job. It's like, oh, okay, wait a minute, that's a qualifying event. She's got 30 days from that point. She can make those kinds of changes. She can cancel. Again, we can't cancel in the middle of the month, so it's an end of the month type of thing, but you know, that happens a lot where people just don't realize that something they're talking about is the qualifying event, and it would allow that employee to make that change at that point. Okay, so keep that in mind. I mean, we hate to dig into other people's business, I get that, but be curious, ask why, or send them to me, because we're going to say why, what's going on, what's happened, is there something in their life, you know, that kind of thing. Okay, so what that kind of brings us to, and you guys don't stone me, all these questions are your next sheet in your handout. So what we did is we created these scenarios and hoping you wouldn't look ahead in your handout, and then just decided to try and lay this out in a little bit of a different format, and really ended up making it just a front and back sheet, one page that if you wanted to pull out and hang on your door, put in a 3-ring binder, whatever you want to do. What we took is kind of the main scenarios and then added a payroll and a who's where side, and then benefits. And so all of those dates, because we recognize you guys don't necessarily remember that it's the first day of the month after 30 days of employment, that you know, it's the first day of the month after a qualifying event. I mean, there's a lot of dates, you know, with benefits that happen. So went through and said, okay, on a new hire, here's what we consider the most pertinent, even from a payroll and a who's where standpoint and benefit standpoint. If they have a status change, those more hours, less hours, those kinds of things, here's what we see. On the back is termination, you know, and then open enrollment. And then of course, because I hate it when I'm searching and I don't know an answer and I don't know who to call. That is one of my biggest pet peeves on when people give out information. So our information's on the bottom. On the back are quick phone numbers, whether you want me, whether you try Renee, the fax number for any of those benefit informations that are benefit forms that are confidential. Fax them to those come right to our computers now. And then I didn't ask Denise, but I did put Denise on here as the parasol support person. I know enough, I know a lot about payroll, I do payroll, but I do it on a different system. I know enough about Parasoft to kind of get myself in trouble. So I'll go so far with you, and then and any of you that have been on the phone with me, you realize I get to a certain point and then it's like, nope, now you've gone too far, you've got to talk to Denise, she's our expert. And Denise or Cindy, both can help us and answer those type of questions. So the next thing in your handout, Father.
quits on August 15th. For many years. I'll go retirement benefits. Or I should say, he started on August 15th.
Mhm.
These retirement benefits released. Is that begin on September 1st?
Great question. So I didn't really get in a whole lot to the retirement, and Father Terry's asking, so that gentleman that started on August 15th, what about retirement and that type of thing? So retirement is even more so your individualized location. And what I mean by that is you can have your own eligibility. We as a diocese mandate and say that you have to offer retirement, but we say you can wait until they've been employed for 12 months, and then you must do a minimum of 2% on the retirement. So a lot of you have shared with me, and I have kind of your location forms. Some people will do it within after 30 days of employment. Some will wait the 12 months as far as retirement benefits to start. And so retirement benefits can vary by location. You could, yes. Right. You could offer retirement before their first year of employment, because that's being more generous than what the mandate says. So. Mm-hmm. No, in that case, usually what I would say is it starts the first of that next month. So, in that case, if you're going to wait the year and do the 12 months of employment and then start their benefits, it would start, they'd start getting retirement on September 1 of that following year. Mike?
Can you clarify for the employee can start
Yes.
putting in right away?
Well, okay, so we didn't really get into a whole lot on retirement. As parishes, as churches, as Catholic schools, the retirement vehicle we should be using is a 403B. And the beauty of the 403B is that the employee can start contributing their own dollars immediately. And so in the scenario Father Terry was talking about, if they start on August 15th, even though maybe you're going to wait and do the 12 months before you start contributing, they could start contributing at any point. All they have to do is work with you, get their account set up. And so they can start their own dollars going into there. And we would encourage that, if you definitely want that, the 403B. So I'm going to give a plug again. If you're at your location and you are not sure, kind of your plan and how it's set up and that type of thing from a retirement standpoint, by filling out a one-page sheet, you can easily be in our diocesan retirement plan. As we have kind of an overall umbrella, you are still your own location. You can set your percent, you can set when it starts, all of that. It's an easy way to make sure you're doing the right, proper plan for your employees. So just contact me if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, Debbie?
Can I backtrack a little bit to the teacher's contract?
Sure.
Benefits? Our teacher's contract says from the first day of school on or about August 23rd until the last day of school, May, whatever is the next year. But their salary is paid over 12 months. So if they're not coming back the following August, but you said their benefits would end May, because that's what the contract says to the end of school?
No.
Okay.
No. So she's asking on those contracted teachers, and contracts run a little different because really what the school is saying to that employee is that they want to contract them for the days of school. And so they kind of lay out the start and end dates of school, but yet they're paid over 12 months. And so when we say benefits from that standpoint, we're saying from the pay started in mid-August, it ends mid-August.
But
their benefits would end the end of August.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the next handout or next sheet in your handout is an accumulation of quite a bit of work by Renee and I. And I'll be honest, it's with that thought process of trying to make things more simple and easier for you, for your employees, and in turn, that makes it easier for us. We have just gotten approval that we are going to be able to use one universal enrollment form. And so so if you recall, an employee right now, a brand new employee, if they take every benefit we offer, they are filling out 5 different forms. This will be one. From now on, this will be one form. It's a lot of information on this form, so there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of, that piece of it, so don't be overwhelmed by that. But we have gotten every one of our providers to agree to allow us to use this. So instead of having to fill out a name and address, social security number, date of birth 5 times, they're going to do it once and then mark the different benefits. This is what we're going to use with open enrollment this year and going forward. So just wanted to give you kind of a sneak peek at it, to be able to look at it. What we rely on for you guys at your location is really, even during open enrollment, but just even in a new hire or a status change where they're eligible all of a sudden, is that you look at this. You know your employees better than we do. You know that, what they said to you, that they intended to take long-term disability and then maybe forgot to mark it. Just take a minute and look through these on every employee. And if there's something that's not waived and left blank, if anything like that, please go back to the employee right then at the time. If you send it to us, we're going to turn around and send it back and say, wait a minute, this isn't all complete, and from that standpoint. The next thing in your handout is our benefit pricing sheet. So during open enrollment this year, you're going to get the communication from us, you're going to get that benefit enrollment form, and then the pricing sheet. What we intend, and before you look at it, those are 2018. We don't have 2019 pricing set yet. We're working on it. We're hoping that's going to be coming here pretty quick. But I wanted to or at least talk about this because the pricing sheet, the way we intend this to be used is that we'll give this to you just like this with the new pricing for 19 with the employee-employer section blank. Please fill that out, make copies, and give that to your employees with their open enrollment communication. And the reason we don't fill that in is the same as what we were talking about on the retirement. We set minimums. So as a diocese, we say, yes, you must offer benefits once they hit 20 hours a week or 1,040 hours in a year. Yes, you must offer benefits. But we set what the minimum is. We're not at your location, and our schools deal with it, but so do you as parishes. I'm not in Yankton trying to compete against the public school teachers and the public school to get good teachers. Maybe they have to be more generous and say, you know what, to get good people, we've got to pay 70% of a single. We've got to pay, whatever percent of the different benefits. Again, we set the minimums. That's what this sheet is intended for. I cannot tell you how many phone calls we get from employees during open enrollment that call directly to our office, which is fine, but they say, well, so that's the total. What does my parish pay? I don't know. Every time I have to send them back to you. Give the information to them right up front with the open enrollment. Get this filled out. What is the dollar amount they're going to pay if they take this plan? Fill the whole thing out. Get that out to them so that they know. Yes, Father.
Raise the minimum when you're
Father Terry's asking if they raise the minimum 1 year, can they lower it later? My first response is yes. As an employer, you always have the option to change benefits. What I would say is you don't want to be doing that a whole lot, but there are times where financially you may just have to. If you're going to do that, it can't go below the diocesan minimum requirements. And in fairness, like if you're looking at that for a January 1 right now, you need to let employees know immediately. You know, a good rule of thumb is to give them a 90-day notice. If you're planning that change, because to be honest, once you hit October 1, anywhere from October 1 to December 31, if they're a January 1 renewal, plans across the state are usually going through an open enrollment during some time in that standpoint. And if your location, if you're dropping your employer contribution, you want to give those employees an opportunity and a chance to say, oh, okay, well, we better look at my spouses. You know, for our family financially, what's the better route? And so you want to give them time to do that, okay? No, we did not put the minimums on there. I can give you, I kind of feel like I gotta quit moving my arms. I can email out the mandate, because the insurance mandate has what the minimums are on there, are required are on there. I didn't put those on any of the forms. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing.
I don't know what you're doing either.
You're talented.
Yeah, yeah. Go the other way. Okay, so my next thing is I wanted to get to the employee handbook. I'll be honest, this is a project that Renee and I have been working on for a minimum of about 8 months. And what this stemmed from is I have gotten so much feedback from parishes, from pastors, all of that that have said, don't make us recreate the wheel. Why can't you guys create a handbook that we can then use? We don't know the laws that have to be included. We don't know, you know, this or that. So have definitely, you know, over the years taken that to heart, started it at times. It's a big job. And it's one of those I really want to point out and say, you know, this is definitely your Catholic family sharing dollars at work, because without that, there wouldn't be myself and Renee. We would never have had time to try and get to something, you know, like this, where we actually are creating a handbook. So while I'm transitioning with this, what I want to let you know is that the pastors. So how come that's not on there? Sorry. This may end up being a problem because I'm trying to open it right up from here, because when it does it off of the computer, it won't let me do it. Can we still show it? Okay. While she's working on that, I'm going to keep going with. So the pastors got an email with instructions and the templates from me last week. So they got that first. And then some of you maybe have already seen it because I've actually had a couple questions and like, what is this? I haven't sent it out to you parish employees yet. I know you're typically the one helping Father do that, and oh, thank you. You're the one helping Father do that and having to do the technical piece of that. So that is going to come out. We have another workshop on Thursday, and so my intent was to send that out at that point. But in your handout, I did give you kind of an instruction sheet. So let me just kind of step back and start by saying that we've put the time and energy into creating this. As we look at parishes being good employers and trying to follow best practices, good practices, best practices, you really should have a handbook, okay? And that's where we came at this from, is it doesn't matter what size parish you are, you really should have a handbook. So we built this with a very broad view in mind, and really the parishes in mind. Those of you with Catholic schools, that not intended to be a Catholic school handbook. They have so many other different requirements, so don't be thinking that. This is really intended for the parishes. So we went through, started pulling in all the required laws for employers' sizes across our state of what our demographic would be. Put that all together, went through and made it more, if you will, ministry-based. We want it to be a reflection of who we are as a ministry and that type of thing. And then we actually have taken the responsibility and sent that on to legal. So what you're going to get when you get this handbook is a handbook that has already been reviewed by legal counsel. We took the time, energy, did some updates, edits, all of that, so that you, as a parish, wouldn't have to sustain that cost. In that, working with legal counsel, saying, okay, I want to build a template because what I have is not necessarily what that parish has. What parish A has is not necessarily what parish B has. I want them to be able to make this their own and be able to edit certain parts of it that they have the ability as a autonomous employer to be able to set. So we come to our finished product of this template. If you look at your instruction sheet, we talk about being able that there are some pieces that are editable and some that are not. The hardest part that we realize that in a handbook, 90% of the time, your name is what's repeated over and over. Sorry. And I'm just going to use an easy one. So when you get this, and it's in the instructions, but I just wanted to preview this for you. You can type in your parish name right there. And sorry. Okay, your parish name on that front page, and if you type in your parish name in this first spot, and hit tab, if you look just on this page, you will notice we've got it built that it changed the name in the rest of the document. And that's, yes, you don't have to type it. I mean, literally, I don't know, Renee and I never did go through and count. At one point, I was like starting to count how many different places we would have to change that. And I'm like, oh man, I was at 50. Because you do, it's your handbook. You state your name over and over. So that is a great thing. In this front page, you will notice the welcome piece of it. Probably what I consider really important is this amended policies. Of course, anytime you change a handbook, you should say it's effective as of what date. Because, you know, if you're superseding something that you had before, if you're making edits at a later point, you want to clearly be saying, what your policies are as of that point. And then, sorry, this is it's a little glitchy when I try and go up and down compared to what I was working with before. Your pastor should sign that. Whoever the pastor is should sign and date that. And so like in this case, I have a 10/1 as the effective date. You know, again, if you're changing from a current handbook and you make significant changes, same rationale, you should give them time to just read it, absorb it, and know what the policy change is. If you're really just formalizing where your policies are, that you've already really has been in practice, then you don't need to give as much change or give as much warning time. So if you have questions on that kind of date type thing, let me know. So if you look at the handouts that I gave you this page that shows, and you will get this again. So it shows you your pages that are editable. Now, because some of us are like, geez, what's page 1 to page 10? Because if you look, the first page that's editable is page 10. I gave you the table of contents too, just for informational sake today. Again, you'll see all of this when you get it yourselves. Page 1 through page 10 are, employment at will. These are policies that you should have in a handbook that we as employers should do and follow. And so there's no reason to edit those. They may seem a little more, I didn't move. I'm just saying. I heard a giggle, so I knew something was going on. Those are good practice policies that should be in place. So when you start going down to the pieces that are editable, I just want to show you real quick. We actually have them color-coded. And I will say, once you get all done with building your handbook, there may be some technical things that we need to help clean up, and pieces of that. Again, I apologize. It's not going to look quite this broken up on your computer. It's this laptop. So the way we've got the different pages. So if you look there, you can't really see on there that it's color-coded. On the computer, it's in orange. So like your work week. Your work week is your work week. You can set what that is. You can set what your time is. That's one of those where you're able to just click in there and change it. And you set it for what makes sense for your location. Your payroll dates. We talked about that of, when is your payroll cycle? Go ahead and fill that in. So as you look at that, as you get farther down, I'm going to jump down because I think this is, there's a couple things to notice. We used to have a separate technology policy. It was totally separate from our handbook. And that was part of the reason for us updating and using a new handbook was to get in and kind of bring it up to current standards. And anymore, usually your technology information is included in your handbook. It's not so much having a separate one anymore. So we did do that. That was one piece in here. One to note is the vacation. We actually have this set up like a table. If you don't like how that looks, don't be afraid to click in there. Get rid of what's there, put your policy in. If it really doesn't end up, in the layout where it looks nice and you want that to be fixed, give Renee or I a call. We'll just log on, do the go to assist, we'll unlock, and to be honest, Renee's more technical with that. She can unlock, make it pretty, if you will, and then lock it back down so that there aren't any other changes that can happen. So that's one piece we know may look a little different. Then we get down to that second section that I have on the instructions page. And that is really more of the whole sections that are optional. Okay, and so what I mean by that is that as a parish, there are some sections, there are some things you're not required to do as an employer. Now, this is where I have to correct myself. In the past, I have said that while we're not subject to FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, we voluntarily follow it. And I've really been corrected in don't do that. Don't say that. Don't communicate that to employees. Because if we do, then we're legally required to use their forms. We basically commit ourselves to all those laws and those regulations. So we are much better off as parishes, as our non-profits, to create our own leave of absence. So with the help of legal, this is one of those really main areas that we really spent quite a bit of time in changing enough of that verbiage so that we're not just grabbing, copying, and paste the Family Medical Leave Act wording. This is one of those as pastors, your location's not required to offer leave of absence. You're not required to do 12 months. Schools you are required, you have to follow family medical leave. But as parishes, there's none of us that are big enough that you have to follow it. So now, again, does that mean we as parishes should just not allow any leave of absence? In my opinion, no. That's not being a good employer. Being a good employer that has best practices, we would allow some sort of leave of absence. Does it have to be 12 months? Maybe not necessarily. Maybe your location is small enough there's no way you can handle that. Maybe it's only 6 months. You have the ability to set that. You have the ability to have differences and to be able to set that. Same thing with doing like military leave, the bereavement leave. And again, on there you can't really see. When you get it, it's orange. It's very distinguishable that you can change it. Jury duty, time off for voting. Those are things that are good practices, best practices, but you as a location aren't required to. So I really want to get that across to you, that in this handbook, in this template, the things that you can edit, you have the ability to make those changes. There are some that are locked, you can't edit. And typically that is because you're required to, we as employers are required to, and they're considered the best practices. And have the correct, just enough legal language, because again, really your handbook, in the past handbooks were meant to be a legal document. And in the human resource world, that is changing. Handbooks are supposed to be in plain, legible, understandable English that employees can understand. It's not meant to be a legal contract and, you know, trapping, and so that an employee doesn't really understand what they even have. They're meant to be just plain language. And so, you know, just really working with the legal to make sure that we're not putting in language that's so far over the top legal that, you know, that we don't need to and don't need to have. And obviously with any handbook, at the end, you have them acknowledge, sign, date, acknowledge that they received it, that they, you know, have had a chance to look at it, and you put that in their file. So, what I would really like for you to do, and this is kind of one of my, again, I'm going to be real. You're your own employer. You are your own autonomous employer. You have your own federal ID number. Your pastor's the head of your organization. Okay? What is that? Why am I saying that? Why am I making that such a big deal? We have created this handbook that's got good, proper legal language in it. It is there for you to use. We hope you take advantage of it. We hope you look at it and go, I'm so happy they put the work in, and you know, I'm going to go in and edit the things I want, that type of thing. What I am going to say is that once you make your edits, once you are completely done and the pastor has approved it, before it goes to employees, it really needs to come back to me. Let me give it a quick review to make sure that you haven't substantially added anything that would put you, you know, more at risk or, you know, more subject to legal ramifications. Let me make sure you haven't changed something, you know, from other legal standpoints. I have a good handle on what needs to be in, what policies need to be included. If I feel something has been changed enough, I may say, oh, I got to run this back by legal counsel. It's changed enough that, you know, I'm not confident. And the reality is, you're your own employer. If Department of Labor walks in and they try to get you, it's you. It's not going to end up being me. So I just want to impress upon you, there is some significance with doing something like this, but this is, in our opinion, probably the best way to go about it is to just have those sections you can edit, but know that, you know, legal counsel has already looked at that, and you're able to use that and adjust what you need to. So with that, are there any questions on the handbook? Yes. You're welcome. You're welcome. And hopefully, you know, the kind of that one piece, as Renee keeps saying, I hope, you know, it's not too clunky as you start trying to edit it. That's been our goal. We've tried it. We've done some trial things. Yes?
Is this specifically for benefit eligible employees or for all of them?
Great question. So the question was, is this for benefit eligible employees or for all of them? This is for all employees. So a handbook would be for all employees. We make the determination or the distinction of when is an employee eligible for benefits, but all employees should know that they are being hired and you're at will. You know, that you have employment at will, that, you know, that they have, these are the days the office will be closed, that your work week starts on this day, ends on this day. You know, all employees need to know the information in here. It may not pertain to every employee because if they're not benefit eligible, you know, but we specify the eligibility. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just thinking that my music people are not gonna wanna read all that.
And you're not responsible for making them read it. You're responsible for providing a handbook and getting them to agree that they have received it and that acknowledgement. I mean, whether they read it is really up to them. I mean, we can't make people do that.
In that last page, makes me wonder, should teachers sign a school handbook like that?
Yes, if Father is asking if teachers should sign a Catholic school handbook. In my opinion, yes. Right now, at this point, to my knowledge, we've not gotten to the standpoint of being able to do a universal Catholic school handbook.
We have one.
Right, more than likely you at your location have one. They should. Yeah, it is a good practice to, whether they're Catholic school or parish employee, to have them, you know, acknowledge that they received it. Any other? Sure.
Twila, can you edit more than just the things that are in orange on this?
No. So the other parts are locked down. Now, that being said, if you have a section that you're like, no, we would need to edit, we want to edit, let me know what that is. Because maybe we can have a conversation to say, okay, what are you going for? What in practice, what's, you know, what do you guys do that's different than, you know, what's on there? So that's not to say we couldn't come to an agreement and legal counsel. Okay. I'm not looking at that now, but any other questions? Thank you, I appreciate it. If you do have questions, I will be in and around today, and especially this morning. You guys know how it is, so I'm not on the schedule for this afternoon. I may duck out, so this afternoon, if you've got some questions, please feel free to come and talk to me. I think what we'll do right now, I know it looks like I went over, but I didn't start until 9:15, so. No, that's where Mike was saying, we're just gonna be a little bit fluid. But go ahead and take a break right now, run to the restroom, grab some additional drinks if you need. And you know what, I'm gonna ask a couple questions. And if you get those right, you can go to the prize table and select anything you want. So what is a magic number in the benefit world?
30 days.
Yep, good one, Marilyn. Actually, Father 1040 is another one. That's our eligibility, the 1040. You can grab a prize too. So when do benefits start for a new hire?
So they're
Yep.
August 15, it would start October 1st.
Right, Deborah. What were you going to say?
I didn't hear what you said. The first month of the
Correct. Both of you can go grab. So go ahead and grab, those that answered those, go ahead and grab from the prize table. And like I said, help yourself.